You're watching a 60-year-old man in a hotel meeting room in Ashburn, Virginia, hand his phone to two FBI agents. Nobody arrested him. Nobody knocked on his door at 6 in the morning. He asked for this meeting. He drove himself here. He signed a consent form giving the FBI permission to search the device in his hand, and he signed it without a lawyer because he believed there was nothing on it. His name is Kevin Patrick Mallory. He spent 20 years inside American intelligence, a CIA case officer in the 90s, running human agents undercover. Then, a senior intelligence officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He speaks fluent Mandarin. He worked in Iraq, in China, in Taiwan. He held a top-secret clearance until October 2012, and then it was taken away. And after that, he could not find steady work. As of January 17, 2017, he was $12,205.32 behind on his mortgage payments. He owed $30,000 on credit cards and more than $200,000 on a home equity line against his house in Leesburg, Virginia. Roughly $230,000 all in. 5 weeks before this meeting, a man in Shanghai who called himself Michael Yang handed him this phone. Right now, Mallory is being helpful. He is showing the agents how the thing works. Here's the normal message mode. And here, watch. This is how you switch it into secure mode. He has already told them, minutes earlier, that the secure side was designed to erase itself, that it keeps nothing, that the whole point of it was that nothing survives. He taps through to secure mode. There's a camera running in that room, and the screen fills up with every single thing he has just spent 2 hours denying. That is the moment this case turns, and we're going to come back to it, to what appeared on that screen, and to the 7 words Mallory says out loud when he sees it, on tape in his own voice. Because here is the shape of what happened to Kevin Mallory. Chinese intelligence gave him a custom-built device for one reason, so that no record of his espionage would ever exist. That device is the reason we know everything. Not a mole, not a wiretap, not a defector. The tool his handlers built to guarantee silence is the single most damaging witness against him, and he carried it into the FBI's hands himself, voluntarily, and turned it on. To understand how a man who spent 2 decades being trained to spot exactly this walked into it with his eyes open, you have to go back to February 2017 and to a message that arrived on LinkedIn. But first, one fact about 2012. Because it changes the color of everything after it. Kevin Mallory did not retire. He graduated from Brigham Young University in 1981 with a degree in political science, went active duty until 1986, stayed on as an Army reservist, and spent 1987 to 1990 as a special agent with the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service. Then 22 years of agencies, contractors, and deployments. He came back to the CIA as a contractor from 2010 to 2012. And then, according to court records, he lost his top-secret clearance after improperly disclosing classified information. That is the thing to hold on to. Before any Chinese intelligence officer had ever heard his name, Kevin Mallory had already been punished once, professionally and permanently, for the exact category of mistake he was about to make for money. Without a clearance, a career like his is unemployable. He founded a consulting company called Global X LLC and ran it out of his house in Leesburg. For roughly 5 years, he had no steady job. Court records use the phrase plainly. It made him a ripe target for recruitment. Somebody was searching for exactly that man. In February 2017, that message arrived. It came from someone presenting himself as a Chinese business recruiter, a headhunter with leads on consulting work in China. Court records call him Richard Yang and describe what he actually was in the flat vocabulary of the trade: a cutout, a co-optee, a friendly, unofficial, deniable layer of insulation between a real intelligence officer and the person that officer wants. Cutouts don't recruit, they introduce. And Richard Yang did his job almost immediately, handing Mallory off to a second man in China. It is worth knowing how the machine on the other end of that message is built, because it explains every move that follows. China's Civilian Intelligence Service is the Ministry of State Security, an organization the FBI describes as roughly the FBI and the CIA combined under one directorate. It runs through provincial departments and municipal bureaus. Its human source operations use trained officers, and around them a ring of cutouts and co-optees posing as diplomats, journalists, academics, businessmen. And those operations prefer to meet their sources inside China. To make that happen, they arrange the travel and they pay the expenses. Cash for a plane ticket, cash for a hotel, cash for your time. All of it framed as consulting. So when a broke former case officer in Virginia is invited to Shanghai twice in 6 weeks, expenses covered, that is not hospitality. That is a service delivering its product to its own doorstep. Nancy McNamara, who ran the FBI's Washington field office, said it flatly after the verdict. Foreign intelligence agents are targeting former U.S. government security clearance holders in order to recruit them and steal our secrets. Mallory had spent 20 years on the other side of that sentence. Now, why Mallory? Because he had advertised. His LinkedIn profile carried the words defense, security clearance, intelligence, national security. Mallory himself later admitted, sitting in a room at CIA headquarters, that anybody with, his phrase, a refined eye could read an intelligence career straight off that page. An FBI supervisory special agent named Ryan Gaynor put it more simply. When you look at this LinkedIn page, he said, it's very clear immediately that he worked in national security. So the first thing you need to understand about the recruitment of Kevin Mallory is that it wasn't clever. It was a search query. On February 21, 2017, Mallory got on a video call with the second man, Michael Yang. Yang said he worked for a Chinese think tank. Mallory took notes by hand while they talked, the way a professional does. Those notes show what Yang was interested in. Among other things, THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, America's anti-ballistic missile shield, the one whose deployment in South Korea had Beijing furious. A think tank headhunter on a first call asking a former case officer about a missile defense system. Mallory wrote it down. And those handwritten notes, in his own hand, would eventually be read to a jury. The think tank had a name, the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. Founded in 1958, funded by the Shanghai municipal government, genuinely respected, genuinely academic. Its publications get read by Chinese policymakers. All of that is true. Here's the other half. Since at least 2014, the FBI has assessed that the Shanghai State Security Bureau, a municipal arm of China's Ministry of State Security, the Civilian Intelligence Service, has a close working relationship with that academy. The Bureau uses academy employees as spotters and assessors, and Bureau intelligence officers use academy affiliation as a cover identity. Which means the words, "I'm with the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences" function in counterintelligence terms roughly like a business card that says, "I might be an intelligence officer." Mallory knew this. That is not speculation. He told the FBI himself, later in a voluntary interview, that he suspected early on that Yang was working for Chinese intelligence. He said he could see the tradecraft because he'd been trained in the tradecraft. He suspected. And then he booked a flight to Shanghai. Before he flew, he sent Yang instructions. This is the detail I want you to hold on to, because everything that happens for the next 2 years hangs off it. On March 8, 2017, Mallory emailed Yang about the phone he wanted waiting for him in China. Not a phone, the phone. And his instructions read like they were copied out of a training manual, because in a sense they were. Put it in an envelope, he wrote. Initial around the seals, tape over the initials, and put that envelope inside another envelope. His stated reason, in his own words, this will make sure that it has not been tampered with. He also told Yang how he'd identify his contact at the hotel. He would be looking, he wrote, for a person with a newspaper under their left arm and keys in their left hand. Double-sealed envelopes, initials under tape, a recognition signal out of a Cold War paperback. Remember the phone. Remember how careful he was about the phone. That care is going to matter more than any other single thing in this story, and not in the direction he intended. On March 9th, the day before he flew, Mallory drove to a FedEx store in Washington, D.C., bought an SD memory card, and scanned 9 pages of documents onto it. But before we get on that plane, something else was happening. And it's the thing that actually ended him. It had nothing to do with China. Somewhere in this stretch, Mallory started calling old friends. He reached out to 2 acquaintances who still worked at the CIA. He wanted introductions. Specifically, he wanted to be put in touch with people in the agency's East Asia division. One of them was a man named Ralph Stevenson. Stevenson offered him the normal, correct thing. "I'll connect you with CIA security." Mallory told him that would not be good. What he wanted was certain leaders of the East Asia division. Stevenson's reaction is on the trial record, verbatim, and it is the sound of a professional's alarm going off. "I told him to never do that again," he testified. "I spoke to Kevin very harshly. I've never spoken to him that way before, and I think he was shocked. But I said, don't ever discuss something like that in that way with me again. Please never do this. This is inappropriate." The second acquaintance, identified in court only as John Doe, found the approach strange. He refused to connect Mallory to a China specialist. Then, both men did the same thing. They reported it. The espionage investigation that ends with Kevin Mallory in a federal prison did not begin in Shanghai. It began with 2 phone calls to old colleagues, who said no, and then picked up a phone and told somebody. Mallory never noticed. On March 10, 2017, he landed in Shanghai. Shortly after he got there, he sent Michael Yang an email. Subject line, examples. Attached were 3 documents, 9 pages total. None of them were classified. That was the point. There was a list of Department of Defense military intelligence acronyms. There was an analytic product bearing the seal of the Central Intelligence Agency, and there were technical specifications for a communications capability. H. Michael Higgins, a former CIA operations officer who became the DIA's Director of Operations, testified at trial about what that email was. It's a bona fides package. It is precisely what a potential asset sends a suspected intelligence officer to demonstrate one thing. I have access. I can reach inside. Look at the seal. Mallory would later spend many hours being questioned by the FBI about his dealings with Yang. He never once mentioned the examples email. In Shanghai, Yang brought a second man. He was introduced as Yang's supervisor. Court records call him Mr. Ding. They met for hours across multiple days. Mallory later told federal investigators exactly what he concluded in those rooms, that Yang and Ding were Chinese intelligence officers and that they were looking for United States government secrets. He also told investigators what they said to him. And this is his own paraphrase of the tasking from an interview transcript. They said, "You know, we really don't want academics. We want," and then they didn't use the word GME, which is top secret or something. But they emphasized that it was not stuff that you could publicly get. "We really don't want academics." They paid him $10,000 in cash and framed it as a consulting rate, a daily billable rate, plus expenses. Invoices for a man with a mortgage, $12,000 in arrears. John Demers, who ran the Justice Department's National Security Division, described the method to CBS in one sentence. It's a grooming, and it's a constant testing to see what the person is willing to do. They also asked him for something that wasn't a document. Mallory later told the FBI that the Chinese officers encouraged him to go get a job with the United States government again. He was, in fact, already applying. And when the agents asked him where he thought his new friends wanted the relationship to go, Mallory answered honestly. He said he believed they would like to see him obtain a position of access inside the U.S. government. Read that answer as an intelligence professional would. That is not a consultancy. That is a placement. Everything he had sold so far was inventory from 2012, 5 years stale. What Yang and Ding actually wanted was Kevin Mallory back inside a building with a badge, on a salary from the American taxpayer, with a phone in a drawer. He described that plan out loud to the FBI, as though describing someone else's problem. And the tasking he was given in the meantime was mundane, which was the whole trick. Write us some papers, short white papers on U.S. policy. He said he wrote 2, entirely out of his head and open sources, delivered them and kept no copies of either. Nothing classified, nothing sensitive, nothing worth a subpoena. Those 2 harmless white papers were the receipt he intended to show anyone who ever asked what the $25,000 was for. Hold that alibi in your hand. In 7 weeks, he is going to hand it to 2 FBI agents, and it is going to be the thing that convicts him of lying. Because the test came back positive within 3 weeks. And it came back in a form nobody at the CIA or the DIA could have predicted, involving 2 people whose names Mallory was legally forbidden to even think about out loud. When Mallory worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency, he had been the handling case officer for a pair of covert human assets, American citizens, real people running real risk on behalf of the United States. The court record protects them under a pseudonym, the Johnsons. There is a rule about people like the Johnsons, and Higgins explained it plainly at trial. Once you stop being their handling case officer, you have no contact with them, ever. Not a call, not a coffee, not a Christmas card. The rule exists for exactly one reason: to protect the operation and to protect them. Mallory had kept in touch anyway, and on March 28th and 29th, 2017, less than 3 weeks after he walked out of a Shanghai hotel room with $10,000 in cash and a request for material you can't get publicly, he sent the Johnsons 9 messages. From those messages, he learned something. The Johnsons were going to China. Sit with the arithmetic for a second. On one side of Kevin Mallory's ledger, 2 intelligence officers in Shanghai who have just paid him and asked for secrets. On the other side, 2 covert American assets whose operation he personally designed, who were about to walk into the country those officers work for. He was the only person alive holding both halves. On April 14, 2017, he flew back to China. And on that same day, the day he landed, somebody began building his phone. Yang gave it to him on that second trip, a Samsung Galaxy Note 4, an ordinary consumer phone you could buy in any mall on Earth, which was exactly the idea. It had been customized so that Mallory could send encrypted communications to a matching handset that Yang kept. Mallory had a word for it. He called it a CovCom device, covert communications. He used the term the way a man uses a term he's used professionally for 20 years. Yang trained him on it personally. There were enough steps that Mallory wrote them down by hand so he wouldn't forget. The sequence for burying a document inside an image before sending it. And he told American investigators repeatedly what he believed about it. He believed the CovCom was designed to prevent his communications from being intercepted by anyone, not by the Chinese government, not by the American one either. He believed it was completely secure. He was right about almost all of it. He was wrong about exactly one thing, and the one thing was the deleting. They paid him $15,000 for that trip. $25,000 total now, and structured with a care that tells you what everyone understood the money to be. Nothing owed for work done on American soil. Nothing owed until the next trip, and his daily rate waiting for him again in June. June. There was already a June. And on April 21, 2017, Kevin Mallory boarded a flight home to the United States, traveling with his son. He was pulled aside at Chicago O'Hare. It was a Customs and Border Protection secondary inspection, the routine kind, the kind nobody enjoys. Officers went through his belongings. On his Customs Declaration, Form 6059B, Question 13 asks whether you're carrying more than $10,000 in currency. Mallory had checked no. Officers found $16,500 in cash in his 2 carry-on bags. Then he started explaining things. He told the officers his trip had been part business and part father-son vacation. He told them that while in China, he'd met a man he knew from his church, and that they had been working together on an anti-bullying and family safety program. He said he had received nothing from this individual, and when they got to the phone, the CovCom, the double-sealed envelope phone, the one with the Chinese intelligence officer on the other end of it, Mallory told them it was a brand new phone he had bought as a gift for his wife. The officer who examined it noted, for the record, that it looked used. Agents later testified about his demeanor that day. He was aggravated, irritated, put out. And then they told him the only consequence would be paying duty on the things he'd bought in China, and his mood, in their words, changed completely. They let him amend his declaration, they let him keep the money, and they let him keep the device. He walked out of O'Hare thinking he had gotten away with something. What he had actually done was create a file, a dated, documented, sworn record of a former top-secret clearance holder coming back from Shanghai with undeclared cash and a lie about a phone. 4 days later, he did the single most inexplicable thing in this entire story. April 25, 2017, around 4 in the afternoon. Kevin Mallory drove to the FedEx store nearest his house in Leesburg, Virginia. Not one across the county, not one in another state, the closest one to his front door. There is surveillance video of what he did there, and it was played for a jury. He takes a stack of blank paper from a clerk behind the counter. He hands a stack of papers to that clerk, a FedEx employee with no security clearance of any kind, to be scanned onto an SD memory card. Yellow legal pad pages are visible in the footage. Then he pays extra to have the originals shredded. 9 documents, 47 pages. Government witnesses testified that every single one of them contained classified information. At least 2 of them carried markings at the top secret level, the level reserved for material whose unauthorized disclosure could reasonably be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security of the United States. Some of it was classified because it discussed specific intelligence sources and methods, specific mechanisms American intelligence would use to collect information from foreign nationals, specific methods and specific targets in one particular country. He handed all of it across a retail counter to a stranger in a branded polo shirt. And when the scanner wrote those files onto the card, it named them the way scanners do, with a string of numbers encoding the date and the time. April 25, 2017, around 4 p.m. Nobody is going to have to prove when he did this. The files are going to say it themselves. Everything up to this point was Kevin Mallory being recruited. From here on, he is the one running it, and every remaining mistake in this story is his own. Now watch the 2 tracks run at once, because from here he is living 2 lives inside the same week. Track 1. He is preparing classified documents for transmission to Chinese intelligence. Track 2. He is asking a CIA acquaintance to put him in touch with CIA security because, as he framed it, he wants to get it on the record. He'd been approached by Chinese intelligence agents on a business trip, and he wanted the agency to know. He was building 2 stories simultaneously, and he believed that as long as he controlled which one had evidence attached, he could choose later which one was true. He had already decided which one to feed the machine first. Just before midnight on May 1, 2017, the COVCOM device started working. Log files pulled from the phone later show what the government called send sequences, running from just before midnight on the 1st to just after midnight on the 2nd. 2 documents went out and arrived. The first was a handwritten page titled Table of Contents. It listed the titles and page counts of the 8 other documents on that SD card. It was, in effect, a menu. Item 1 on it read S&T Targeting Opportunity, Science and Technology. The second document was the item that matched, a handwritten cover page reading S&T Targeting in China, a typed page headed White Paper, and 2 pages of handwritten notes off a yellow legal pad, the same yellow the FedEx camera had filmed 6 days earlier. The White Paper contained classified information, and what it described was a proposed Defense Intelligence Agency operation. The operation would have involved the Johnsons. It included information about that intelligence relationship. It was drawn from a PowerPoint presentation Mallory himself had once given to DIA supervisors back when he was inside. A pitch, in his own words at the time, to do something unique and sensitive against China. The proudest thing he had ever built, sent as a sample. Yang confirmed receipt. Then Yang asked for the rest. The conversation that followed on May 3, 2017 is preserved word for word. The misspellings, the dropped words, all of it. This is Yang first. I suggest you send all and retype the handwriting. And number 1 is obvious, the first page of a complete article, where the else is and why it is black on top and bottom. We will try our best to apply for another sum of amount, as you required. However, I'm not sure it will be the same amount for now, and I will try. And for safety, we cannot send you in one time or in a short period altogether. Need to figure out a better way. Read that again, and notice what Yang is asking. Why is it black on top and bottom? Yang had noticed the redactions. Yang wanted to know what Mallory had blacked out, and Mallory told him. The black was to cross out the security classification. Top secret / Orcon / I had to get it out without the chance of discovery. Unless read in detail, it appeared like a simple note. There it is, in writing, to a Chinese intelligence officer. He blacked out the words top secret so the page would look like a note if anyone glanced at it. And then he explained the trick to the buyer in a message on a phone. Then he gave payment instructions. I have arranged for a USD account in another name. You can send the funds broken into 4 equal payments over 4 consecutive days. When you agree, I will send you the bank EG instructions. An account in another name, broken into 4 payments across 4 days, small enough not to trip anything. Same conversation. He keeps typing. And now he tells Yang about O'Hare. It was dicey, look it up, when they asked for me by name. If they were looking for me in terms of state secrets and found the SD card, we would not be talking today. I am taking the real risk, as you, Ding, and higher-up bosses know. Read that clause again. If they were looking for me in terms of state secrets and found the SD card, we would not be talking today. He is not describing a misunderstanding at an airport. He is describing a near miss. And then, in the same breath, he writes the sentence that ends him. Note: in the future, I will destroy all electronic records after you confirm receipt. I already destroyed the paper records. I cannot keep these around. Too dangerous. I will destroy all electronic records. He typed those 6 words into the one electronic record he could not destroy. 2 days later, on May 5th, he wrote the line that would be read out in court, printed in headlines, and quoted by a federal prosecutor in a sentencing hearing 2 years later. Your object is to gain information, and my object is to be paid for. Yang's reply, in full. My current object is to make sure your security and try to reimburse you. And Mallory, I can also come in the middle of June. I can bring the remainder of the documents I have at that time. The remainder. The rest of an index of 8 documents, sitting on a card hidden in his house, and a plane ticket for the middle of June. The same day, May 5th, the log files show 2 more completed send sequences. Within a minute of each other, Mallory told Yang he was sending document number 2, the DIA PowerPoint, and a CIA document titled FISA. The PowerPoint mattered more than everything else combined. It contained substantially more detail about the Johnsons and their work for the United States than the white paper had. Higgins testified that if Yang had received it, Chinese intelligence would likely have been able to identify them. 2 American citizens, working covertly, about to travel to China that summer. And there is one more detail about that PowerPoint, and it tells you more about Kevin Mallory than any message he ever sent. He didn't scan all of it at FedEx. He stopped short. He cut it off right before the slide that mentioned him. He was willing to send the operation. He redacted himself. Yang would later claim he never received either of those 2 files. Now, if this were a film, here is where the story would end, and it would end cleanly. Because on May 12, 2017, Kevin Mallory walked into the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency and sat down across from an investigator named Michael Dorsey and told him the truth. Some of it. He said that he now believed the men he'd met in Shanghai were affiliated with Chinese intelligence. He said one of them had given him a communications device and trained him how to use it. He agreed to bring that device back so that American technicians could examine it. In the movie, that's the third act. The old officer, in over his head, does the right thing at the last possible moment. He hands over the phone. The agency turns it against the Chinese. Roll credits. That is not what happened. And it was never going to be. And Judge T.S. Ellis would eventually say why, out loud in open court. Because Mallory wasn't confessing. He was building the second story. Insurance. If the O'Hare stop meant somebody was already pulling a thread, then the man who had voluntarily reported a Chinese approach could not possibly be the man selling top-secret documents to the Chinese. Ellis's verdict on that strategy, years later, from the bench, don't think that you can be a double agent. Because when Mallory came back on May 24th expecting Dorsey, Dorsey was not alone. There were 2 FBI special agents in the room. Mallory came voluntarily. He signed a consent form authorizing a search of the device, and he handed it over, and the FBI imaged it on the spot, copied it, whole, and then, remarkably, handed the phone back to him. Then they asked him questions for a long time. He told them he had given the Chinese 2 short white papers, unclassified, written out of his own head and open sources. He said he hadn't kept copies. He told them he had provided no other documents to the Chinese. None. Not on paper, not electronically, not in any format. He told them he had never transmitted anything using the device except a test message. And then he offered to show them how the device worked. Nobody made him do this. He volunteered. He wanted to demonstrate his own competence, or his own innocence, or both. A professional showing amateurs a piece of tradecraft. He walked them through the normal messaging mode. Then he said, "Here's the part that matters. This is how you move it into secure message mode." He had already told these agents, in that same room, minutes earlier, that the system was designed to delete all previous history. He switched it into secure mode, and the chat history came up on the screen. Ryan Gaynor, the FBI supervisory special agent, described it to CBS years afterward. When he goes to demonstrate it, he said, up on the screen where he expects to have his whole chat history basically deleted, up on the screen comes some of the chat history. And Gaynor said something else about that afternoon, something that almost never happens in a counterintelligence case. So this is the rare moment, right, in an investigation, in an espionage case, where we actually have video footage. There is video of a former CIA case officer watching his own espionage appear on a phone he brought in himself. You can hear what he says. 7 words, and he stumbles on the first one. I'm surprised it kept this much. And then Kevin Mallory did the last thing left to do. He kept being helpful. The agents asked him about the messages on the screen. So he pointed at them and sorted them. This one is mine. This one is his. That one I sent. That one came from him. He identified his own traffic to the FBI, line by line, including this one. I can also come. In the middle of June, I can bring the remainder of the documents I have at that time. Asked what the remainder of the documents meant, he said it referred to the 2 unclassified white papers. He said he had been stringing the Chinese along. He said he didn't actually have anything to give them. There were, at that moment, 2 SD cards in his house holding 9 classified documents, and one of them was carefully concealed. So why didn't the phone delete itself? Here is the whole mechanism, once, because it is the reason this story exists. On April 14, 2017, the day Mallory's plane touched down in China, an application called Exposed was installed on that Samsung Galaxy Note 4. Exposed is a framework that lets you reach inside other apps on an Android phone and change how they behave. A few days later, a second custom application went on, and a day after that, Exposed was configured to work with that custom app to do something genuinely elegant. Build an encrypted communications tunnel inside WeChat. WeChat, the single most ordinary app in China. 1 billion people every day. Traffic from the Cavcom looked like a man messaging his family. Documents didn't travel as documents. They were buried inside images, steganography, which is why Mallory needed handwritten notes to remember the steps. On April 19th, somebody uploaded test material to make sure the custom app worked, and the chat itself ran in that separate secure mode, which both men understood to be ephemeral, live while you were in it, gone when you weren't. It wasn't gone. A reverse engineering expert named James Hamrock walked the jury through what was on that device. And the analyst who examined the phone for the FBI testified that he believed the encrypted communications app had crashed and that the crash left an unintentional record behind. Residual secure messages sitting on a phone built to hold nothing. That is what came up on the screen in Ashburn. And it was worse than that, in 3 directions at once. First, around June 2nd, further technical examination of the FBI's image of that device recovered additional secure message history, more of the same conversation than had been visible in the room. The May 3rd messages, the classification markings, the bank account in another name, the line about being paid. Second, that custom app kept log files in its own database recording send sequences. The phone had been quietly writing down every time Mallory completed the steps to transmit something, which is how investigators know he tried to send one top-secret document about a foreign intelligence service's capabilities 4 separate times, on May 1st and 2nd, and another one once on May 2nd. Failed attempts leave records too. Third, the file names, those numeric strings the FedEx scanner had stamped on. They encoded April 25, 2017, at around 4 in the afternoon, and there was a FedEx surveillance camera in Leesburg, Virginia that had filmed the man handing documents across a counter at exactly that time. Every safeguard built into that device to make the espionage invisible became a witness. The tunnel logged. The scanner time-stamped. The self-erasing chat kept the receipts. On June 22, 2017, they arrested him at his house. The search recovered 2 SD memory cards, each holding the same 9 documents, the same 47 pages. Prosecutors said agents also found wigs and disguises in the house. One card had been carefully hidden. 2 days later, on June 24th, Kevin Mallory made a phone call from jail. Jail calls are recorded. Every inmate is told this, and every former intelligence officer on Earth knows it. On that recording, played to a jury at his trial, Mallory asks his family to search the house for the hidden SD card. Investigators found it. A grand jury indicted him on July 27, 2017, on 4 counts. Conspiracy to transmit national defense information to a foreign nation, delivering it, attempting to deliver it, and making materially false statements to federal agents. Then, at his detention hearing, prosecutors made an argument that sounds theatrical until you remember the wigs. They said Mallory should be held because a man with his tradecraft, his languages, his contacts, his 20 years of learning how people disappear could get out of the country. A magistrate judge disagreed and released him on an unsecured bond with home detention and an ankle monitor. The former CIA case officer accused of selling top-secret documents to China went home to Elk Run Court to wait for his trial. His trial opened in Alexandria, Virginia in the last days of May 2018 in front of Senior United States District Judge T.S. Ellis III. It ran 9 days, and it was strange, because most of the evidence could not be said out loud. The court used something called the silent witness rule. The jury, the judge, the lawyers, and the witnesses all held the classified exhibits and read them. The public gallery did not. The documents were printed with line numbers so an attorney could direct a witness to line 14 without anyone in the room speaking line 14. Mallory's trial appears to be the first in American history where a judge extended that rule to cover a defendant's own publicly available documents, because reading them aloud alongside the testimony would have let anyone in the gallery connect the dots. His defense was that he was a loyal American running a private operation, stringing the Chinese along to expose what they were doing and passing them nothing of value. That he was a seller and Yang was a buyer, and a transaction is not a conspiracy. The prosecution called Higgins, who had run operations at the DIA, and asked him what those documents were worth now, a year later. The information itself still remains current and revelatory, he testified. It would still have a severe impact on national defense. And Jennifer Jelly, the National Security Division trial attorney on the case, took the abstraction out of it. These were documents that specifically talked about human beings, she said, whose lives could be in danger. His lawyers pushed the buyer-seller argument hard because it was the only door left. If Mallory was simply a man selling paper to a man buying paper, then there was no conspiracy, just a transaction. And a transaction is a different crime with a different number attached to it. Judge Ellis refused to give the jury that instruction, and the reason he gave went to the heart of what the Espionage Act is for. Suppose, he said, a man takes the secrets of the United States and gives them to a foreign government purely because he wants money. Doesn't care whether it hurts the United States, doesn't care whether it helps a foreign nation, has no interest in that at all, just has interest in money. That conduct, Ellis told the courtroom, is punished by this statute, which is, more or less, the sentence Kevin Mallory had already typed into his own phone 13 months earlier and sent to Shanghai, in writing, over an encrypted tunnel he believed erased itself. On June 8, 2018, the jury convicted Kevin Mallory on all 4 counts. Then it got complicated. Judge Ellis threw out 2 of them, the counts for actually delivering and attempting to deliver national defense information, not because the jury was wrong about what he did, but because the government could not prove where he was standing when he pressed send. Venue. The transmissions happened between 2 midnights on a phone that could have been anywhere. The conspiracy conviction and the false statements conviction stood. Sentencing took a year, and it kept getting postponed because Judge Ellis was trying to answer one question nobody could answer. Did Mallory actually intend to burn the Johnsons? Prosecutors said yes and asked for life. The defense pointed to computer forensics and asked for 10 years. Part of the hearing was closed to the public. On May 17, 2019, Ellis gave his ruling on that question, and it was the most consequential thing he said that day. He could not conclude that Mallory intended to send the material that would have identified them, though he suspected Mallory's long-term intentions were sinister. If I had concluded that sources had been compromised, Ellis said, I would impose a far more severe sentence. The defense argued that $25,000 was a trivial sum for treason. Ellis answered that the sum was small only because Mallory had been caught at the very beginning of the relationship. John Gibbs, the assistant U.S. attorney, stripped it to the frame. At its heart, this was a very basic crime. He was desperate for money, and the most valuable thing he had was our nation's secrets. Then Ellis passed sentence, 240 months, 20 years, plus 60 months concurrent for lying to the FBI, plus 5 years of supervised release. And before it was over, he said one more thing to Mallory and to everyone who would ever read the transcript. If you choose to play footsie with another country, you have committed a crime. And the Justice Department said out loud what the 20 years was really addressed to. John Demers, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, pointed out that Mallory was not an anomaly. He was part of a pattern. In the same season as Ron Hansen in Utah and Jerry Chun-Shing Lee in Virginia, both former U.S. intelligence officers, both taken by China. This case, Demers said, is one in an alarming trend of former U.S. intelligence officers being targeted by China and betraying their country and colleagues. 3 officers, 1 recruiting method. And in Mallory's case, the government's sentencing memo reduced the entire 20-year career to a single clause. A man entrusted with the nation's critical secrets who put the country and human lives at risk for financial gain, and then lied about it. Kevin Mallory has never acknowledged guilt. The Fourth Circuit affirmed his conviction on July 11, 2022, rejecting every argument. Rehearing was denied that August. The Supreme Court declined to hear his case on April 3, 2023. He is serving 20 years. Michael Yang, Mr. Ding, and Richard Yang have never been publicly identified, never been charged, and are not in American custody. The Johnsons, so far as the public record shows, were never compromised. Judge Ellis found he could not conclude otherwise, and that finding is the reason Mallory did not get life. Ralph Stevenson, The friend who told him never to do that again testified for the prosecution. The FBI's video of the demonstration became evidence, and Ryan Gaynor eventually described it on camera. Jennifer Jelly argued the appeal and won it. The FedEx clerk in Leesburg who scanned 47 pages of classified material for a walk-in customer never knew what was in the stack. And the phone, the one that had to arrive in 2 envelopes, initialed around the seals, tape over the initials, so that Kevin Mallory could be certain nobody had tampered with it, became a government exhibit. It was built to guarantee that no record of any of this would ever exist, and it is the record. He asked them for a phone that kept nothing, and they gave him one that kept everything.